Hello, welcome to Getting Started with Pantheon, our first live workshop of today. Thanks for checking it out. So, my name is John Richards, and I'm a developer advocate here at Pantheon. If you're curious about what a developer advocate does, my role functions in kind of two ways. One of those is to take information from people like you and take it back to our engineers. So if you've got ideas for improvements, new feature requests, or even bugs that aren't working, always want to hear those so I can make sure that it gets into the right hands so we can get things fixed and working for you. The other thing I do is I do trainings like this, speak at conferences, basically help people better understand how to use Pantheon and how to get the most out of Pantheon platform once they've committed to it. So hopefully what you'll hear today will be helpful. If you are getting started with Pantheon, then this is the perfect place to begin. We'll walk through kind of an overview of what Pantheon is and does, kind of the ideals and the values that we strive for, and then we'll dig into what using the platforms actually like, do a little live demo of how it works, and hopefully you'll leave better prepared and better understanding how Pantheon works. So how can you participate? Well, it depends on how you're joining. If you're joining on one of our live stream locations, then you can put a message in the chat if you've got questions or interact that way. If you're here in Zoom, you can post in the chat or in the Q&A section. I'll be monitoring those as we go along and answer if you put anything in there. All right, so live workshops, what are they? What do we got here? So hopefully you heard about this and knew you signed up for it. That's why you're here. Or actually, maybe you are viewing this on our streaming platform and didn't know we offer these live workshops. What we do every Thursday, we will have this first one, which is a great introductory workshop. And then we offer more advanced workshops after this. So today being the last Thursday of the month, the fourth Thursday, we will be talking about going live best practices in about an hour from now. So if you're interested in that, you can sign up at pantheon.io/live-workshops. If there's another workshop you'd like to attend, or maybe you want to get one of your coworkers to check it out as well. But we also offer other ones. You can see we cover topics like Terminus, Quicksilver. So if you're looking to do more advanced automation or integration work, those tools can be super helpful. And then we also cover the topic of performance. But today we are talking right now, this workshop is about getting started with Pantheon. So Pantheon is a website operations platform. When we talk about this, we'll talk about, you'll hear me maybe mention this term web ops. That just means website operations. The reason we call it website operations is we want to talk about something that's a little broader than maybe you're more familiar with terms like DevOps, things like that, incredibly important. But when it comes to managing a website, we really view that as a team sport. It's not just developers. It's important that designers, stakeholders, content editors, lots of people are at the table to understand like, oh, hey, this is a team thing. As a developer before, I've worked on a project where just I and the other designer worked together really well. We collaborated, we built an amazing site, but we didn't collaborate with stakeholders. And within a year, they abandoned the site and went with a less beautiful site. Like the site that the designer had built was amazing, but it didn't match the needs they needed. We had missed that step. And because we didn't work as a team, it was just, I was building something and he was making it look beautiful. And we forgot kind of along the way about the importance of making sure this works for what the stakeholders needed. And so as we look at this, it's important as you think about your website to realize that it has a job to do and it takes a team to really make that excel. So how does Pantheon support this idea of we need to make websites available for everyone and we want to make that work well? And so kind of built from the ground up for this idea of agility. And what that looks like is at our base layer, we have kind of underlying everything. We have our serverless CMS platform. So abstracted out, this is in the cloud. You don't need to worry about server settings. You don't need to worry about those kinds of things. Your site is sitting out there, and we'll look at how that works a little more later on, but your site is in the cloud. You don't have to worry about it. We make sure that the underlying architecture of containers allows your site to scale quickly, spin up sandboxes as needed, a lot of features that come out of that. On top of that, we're going to layer in automations to make life easier and to make sure that like error-prone tasks are automated so you don't forget those. Automated backups, for instance, making sure that somebody doesn't forget they need to run backups. Automated ways to deploy code across your site. Which brings us to structured agile workflows. We want workflows that are agile, and by that you can run them when you need to, that they can handle a lot of different working styles, but we want them structured in that there is a consistency to it. And so together, this brings a lot of power. And when we go through the live demo, you'll kind of see what this looks like. But basically the idea is your content is going to go get tested. It's going to start somewhere, be built. It's going to get tested. And only once that's verified, it will make it into production. Now, along the way, you can be agile. You can add in lots of different extra steps, but you know that there's some structure there underlying that. It's going to give you a lot of power. And then hopefully once you've done this, like this gives you a really strong foundation that allows you to begin to measure how your website's doing and improve on it. And so we're looking at this point, like how do you do search engine optimization? Maybe you're doing A/B testing. All the things that a web ops team needs to succeed can be built on top of this kind of solid foundation underneath. So what does this look like in practice? Well, here are kind of 4 key areas Pantheon focuses on and kind of how that structure we just looked at enables this. So one of the things we get because of this is speed. Pantheon is incredibly fast. We did a study a while back. Google released some data and about how the internet runs. And so this was at WordCamp US. I remember being there whenever Google kind of released in partnership with the HTTP archive, this data. And so running that through BigQuery, we looked at all the different websites out there in the higher ed dimension and that were running WordPress. And what we found is people who were running a do-it-yourself environment, which is what I come from, higher ed, do-it-yourself, Pantheon was 4 times faster. And even if they were using a managed host out there, Pantheon was still twice as fast. And so don't just take my word for it. We've got a link here. You can go kind of double check our work, which this is a great time to let you all know. At the end, I'll be sharing out a resources link that will have links available to all these things. We used to kind of paste them into the chat, but that's easy to forget or get lost along the way. So at the end, I'll have one kind of mega link that will take you to information on all these different things I'll be talking about. So you can kind of check them if you want to reference them, but you don't need to worry about it right now. So speed, incredibly important. We'll talk about why and how, but there's a lot of things that Pantheon does to really bring this blazing speed. Another thing is agility. So our platform is container-based, and this allows it to change quickly. We don't have to worry about breaking things in the way that you might if you have like one mega site. Allows us to be more efficient and reliable than if we were using like clusters or virtual machines. And so this technology is incredibly powerful and gives us this agility that we're going to want to see. So what does that look like? As I mentioned, I can show here kind of a quick overview. So this here is what kind of a basic Pantheon website looks like. You've got, there we go. You've got a PHP application container. So this is going to be the code that's built for the site. Your PHP code runs here. You've got a separate container that's your file system. This is going to store all of your assets. And then you have another one that is the database server. And we run all of this using Git to manage the code here. Now, these are the containers here. I talked about speed. Remember about being fast. One of the reasons that's so fast is if we look here, you can see there are, I believe, over 70 points of presence now around the world where we have our cached CDN. And so whenever we're able to get a cached version of your site, we can put it at these locations to make sure anybody visiting your site gets access to that incredibly fast. So if you want to know more about this, we have a workshop around optimizing your cache because it will give you incredible performance gains if you can get it right. This cache piece in front, but if it hasn't been cached yet or not, that's when it kind of hits this process back here. So that's the basic piece, is kind of those containers working in tandem. As we scale this up, part of that agility starts to show up. As you can see, new containers can be added in here. So we can have other PHP containers dropped in here. We can drop in a container for Apache Solar Search. We've got a container here now for object caching. And you can New Relic APM has access to look into your containers and can give you all kinds of performance data coming out of that. And then we'll talk, excuse me, in a little bit more about scalability, but I do want to show, like, one of the powers of this agility is being able to add in even more containers as needed. Maybe you've got a huge event coming, a giant traffic spike, more containers can be added in. We can add in a backup database for failover replication and guaranteed SLA time. And so this is like the fundamental underlying architecture that allows Pantheon to be fast, agile, and also reliable. We're looking to make sure you have 99.95% uptime, and we back that with an SLA for our elite plan sites. So wanting to know more about that, you should definitely check out the site status.pantheon.io. If you're ever wondering, hey, is my site doesn't seem to be loading, is it me, is it all of Pantheon? You can come in here and take a look at our different sites and see what's operational. You can come down here and look at our site availability. This is across all sites, not just our elite sites. And so you can see across all of them, we're at 99.9 right now. And then you could come down here for past incidents. There was a temporary database incident a few days ago, so you can see when that occurs. There'll be information in here about it, the monitoring that happened, and information on that. And then within a certain amount of time, like a full report will be posted as the team does a postmortem and analyzes what's happened. So great place to go if you are experiencing anything. And of course, you can always ping support if that's the case. All right, and the other thing we talk about is scalability. I showed you a little bit about how those containers can make that happen, but let's talk about why this is important. You want to make sure that there's no downtime whenever you scale your site. You want to be able to handle these kinds of things. And so Pantheon helps scale in kind of two key areas. One, we just looked at, is by scaling infrastructure. We like to talk about the ACLU who had trouble with their website crashing whenever they would get a huge amount of people visiting it. And that was one of the reasons they ended up looking for a new host and came over to Pantheon. After they came over to Pantheon, this was during the time when the U.S. administration announced the travel ban. It's been a few years ago, but you may still remember it. But during that time, a ton of people flocked to the ACLU's website. In fact, that weekend, they had a spike of traffic that was 8,500%. So a huge amount of traffic coming in that they hadn't expected, and their website stayed up the entire time. So that's awesome. Like, that in and of itself is a great success story. But again, your website has a purpose to do. And for the ACLU as a nonprofit, they're looking for donations. And during that one weekend, they received 6 times their yearly average budget in donations. And so we could see here how being up allowed them to meet the moment and get what they needed, which was those donations coming in. And so being able to scale has real world benefit. It's not just that, hey, is your message there? But that's often a critical time for people to want to interact with your website. Another way we scale is we help teams that have small amount of developers or a small team in general do a lot more. And so Apogee is one of these, a subsidiary of Google, and they have a very small team. But that team is able to manage hundreds of client sites, thousands of sandbox sites, because Pantheon allows a team to do more with our automation and integration tooling. And so if you're a small team, sometimes the value you'll really get out of a Pantheon, not everybody has a use case where, you're going to hit a global national audience and need to scale your site that way. But if you're working on a small team, you may need to be able to do more. You want to be more efficient. Pantheon can help you scale in that way as well. So that kind of covers the Pantheon philosophy, kind of what's going on behind the scenes, what we're looking to do, and kind of our way of focusing on platform improvements. But now let's jump into what developing on Pantheon is like. And so this here is a little bit of we're going to walk through an example of how the development workflow works. And then we'll step over and do a live demo as we walk through changing something on a site and see how this works in practice. So here we have our development workflow. I mentioned, you may remember, actually I'll slide over here real quick and show. If we go back here to this, if we jump right back to that basic one, remember there's kind of 3 key parts to the site. There's your code that you've made, the PHP code that's going to run. There's important information in the database, of course, that dynamic content. And then you probably have assets of some kinds, maybe images for your website, but this is also could be PDFs or other flat files that aren't going to change that you're storing. So you've got those 3 important pieces. And so whenever you're building a website, this here is a best practice. And it is not Pantheon specific. Lots of groups do this. We know this, this best practice predates Pantheon, but we've baked it into our system. So hopefully that allows you to use it more effectively. And the idea is that whenever you're working, the code that you're developing needs to be developed somewhere, and then it should be tested somewhere, and eventually it should make it to your live environment. And the idea is that code that is made only flows forward in this workflow. You develop the code, you move it forward, and eventually that will make it to live. But remember, there's 3 parts to the site that we just looked at. So we've got the code, but what about the assets in the database? Well, the assets in the database, once they make it to production, that's the canonical source. That's the source of truth for your website. And so you want to make sure you can't pull up, if you deployed the database from dev, even if you had copied it recently, you might overwrite some comments or things like that that were made. And so assets and files should only ever move down from line. Now, whenever you're testing a site, it's important that you're working on an environment that mirrors your live environment. Otherwise, you can't be confident in your test. I've totally been working on code before that worked in a development environment. We moved it into test and we moved it into test and it actually worked. Then we moved it into production and it broke. And the reason was, partly, we weren't on Pantheon. And what had happened was our environment, even though we tried to use this workflow, our test environment was no longer in sync with the live environment. So Pantheon can automate that for you, because even though we had test, in this case, what had happened was we had updated the version of PHP running on our test environment, but not our production yet. And so somebody had written code that worked in the new version of PHP and then did not work once we made it to production. So making sure that this is a mirror is incredibly important. And Pantheon will make sure that happens. And in fact, you can even pull these files and database down, test, know that it works, and then you can deploy that up. Really great feature for updates, whether that's Drupal modules or WordPress plugins. As you deploy these security changes, they're important, but who knows what that could break. And so having a test environment that mirrors your production allows you to look, verify the site still works, and quickly deploy that instead of needing to spend a weekend trying to fix everything. And then, of course, when you're done, you can copy everything from the live all the way back down to dev again and begin developing on the newest feature that you would like to work on. So what does this look like? Let's take a jump over here to a little bit of a live demo and see how that works. So for this example, we're going to be working on pantheondemo.com. And this here is a mock theater sites. And you can see we've got this purple buy tickets button. So we've got this theater that Pantheon could be running, and we want to drive more tickets. For us, that's the purpose of our website. We want people to buy tickets to the shows. And so to drive these tickets, the marketing team did some testing, and they've found that, hey, this purple button, while it fits our scheme, kind of blends in a bit. We would get more people buying tickets if they would see it. Maybe some people complained about, hey, I couldn't find the buy tickets button. Let's try and make that red and see if it makes a difference. So we get that change request, comes in, and now as the developer, I need to figure out how to make this happen. So I might come in here and inspect this buy ticket button. Look in here, this might be a little hard to see, but I'm looking here to see that there's a class called CTA, or call to action, and I can see the background color has been set to purple. So I know if I want to change this, I should go to the CSS file and make that change. Excuse me. So that's the site. My next step would be to log into the Pantheon dashboard, and then I would want to go find that specific site. So from the dashboard, you'll have like a list of sites that you have access to, but more often you'll be actually looking for a specific organization. And let's see, I don't remember which one this is under. I usually have it pulled up already. Let's jump in here. If not, I'll go look and find it. All right, I don't see it. So let's see if I could just find it here. Here's our Pantheon weekly demo site, dashboard loading up. So you would go under your organization, you would find it, click the link, and then you will see a page that looks like this. So this is what a standard page looks like for a website. You can see there are some Drupal updates here we could pull in. I'm not going to worry about those too much at the moment. Instead, we are going to just be focused on making this change, but we could absolutely work on these if we wanted as well. So let's see here. I'm going to go ahead and connect with my SFTP client. So I'm going to click on here. You can see information about how to connect. But if I can click this, it will open up my client. I know CyberDuck takes 2 clicks for some reason. My Mac doesn't want to open it on the first try. So I'll click again. There we go. So it's popping up here, asking for a password. It's pre-filled in the other information. I use a SSH private key, so I'm just going to select that instead and log in. So what we've done so far is we've logged into the dashboard. We found our website. We made sure we were on the dev. So again, we want to start in development. Actually, let's take a look at the dev site too while I'm here. So I'm going to pull it up. I can see on the dev site the tip button is purple, as well as, obviously here in production, it's purple too. All right, so we want to change that. I'm now here. I can click this link to go to the site, click here if I wanted to log into the dashboard. And then of course over here, I was able to get to the SFTP. Now I know this change is going to exist. It's a code change. So under code, it's going to be inside of the museum theme we have. And in here, I'm going to find our CSS file, and then I will go ahead and edit that with my text editor. All right, let me bring this over. Hopefully you can see this okay. I'm going to be looking for that CTA. Here it is, that call to action. We can see it's set to purple. So I'm going to go ahead and change that over to red and then save this file. Now I've used CyberDuck enough to know that if I modify a file and hit Command S or save, it will, on the fly, it will go ahead and upload that for me. So that file is being uploaded to the site. As we're here. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is look over here. This was the site. It's purple, but let's go ahead and do a refresh. Boom, it's red. So SFTP'd in, uploaded a file, it's red. Let's verify though. Here's our production site, purple. We made sure nothing changed there. So we now have a dev site with red where I've made the change, and a production site that is purple. So I'm going to refresh this page here. We should be seeing that update showing up here. So this is where that Git managed piece comes into play. For this change to move up to test, we need to commit it. So it's showing here, but it's not available to move forward to eventually get into production unless we commit that change. And this is, again, also the structured piece. It is required. The advantage being Git allows you to do rollbacks. It allows you to track who made changes. And so that's why we rely so heavily on Git for these kinds of things. But it also means we could switch over to Git here. I could have pulled the file up on my local environment, made the change, did eventually a git push those changes up to the directory, and it would have made the change as well. So you can kind of, you've got flexibility, that agility on how you work with your workflows, but you know that there's always this structure shared across the team, that it's going to end up in Git, and it's going to go from dev to test to live. So we can see the change here. I can click on this. Because we're using Git, we can also look and see an actual diff file, which will tell us everything that changed. We can see this purple line was removed and red was added, which is exactly what we wanted. So let's go ahead and say we updated the CTA to be red. And then I'm going to go ahead and hit commit here. So this will start to commit the change and make it available. So our next step is going to be coming over to test to move this change in here. We can see there's nothing up here. That will change once this commit completes. While we're waiting, I'll show you up here, we have a section called workflows, and then it actually tracks the work happening on the website. So you can see, we can see automated backups have been running on our different environments. We can see I'm committing some code changes. Those are showing up here, and it's assigned to me because I'm the one who did it. So there's some pretty handy ways here. You can look, see what people have done while you were away. You can see what automated work is done. All right, so it says this is done. So let's go ahead and look over here at test, and you can see now instead of the log, we actually have a whole list here. Now I'm going to open up the test site. we already verified that dev is red as we wanted, but I'm going to open up test here. Test and dev, if they aren't used regularly, will sometimes throw this error. It just means it went to sleep because it's a test site. Nobody was using it. You can just hit refresh if this occurs to you, and boom, it'll be back up as the server went online as it showed you that information. All right, so we can see it is still purple. We can see test up here. So this lets us know the environment we're in. And this is the name of our site, Pantheon Weekly Demo Site, which matches this title up here in the dashboard. All right, so let's make this happen. I'm going to put the same message here. And you can see now we have some checkboxes up here, and these are critical. So this first one is a Drupal thing to help make sure if any database changes happen, it gets synced up. But the next one's really nice, which is clear the caches after pulling the code. I have definitely made changes so many times in my life and then send it over for somebody to say, hey, does this work? And they say, I don't see anything different. Oh, I forgot to clear the cache. Now I go do that. Just ignore that extra step by just leaving this checked. And what it will do is after your change goes up, it clears the cache for you. And now you know you can share it out. You don't have to worry about accidentally forgetting. So just a nice little time saver. And then this last one, this is the one that's really the valuable one. It pulls the files in the database from the live environment. So we come back over here and we can see we're at this stage right now. We made a change on dev. We then deployed that code. Or we're in the step of deploying that code right now, but we don't want, an important piece for us to remember, we want to sync up the files and database as well. And that happens with just a check of a box. This is normally very difficult because you need to then do a bunch of search and replace to make sure all the database entries match up to the new environment, but Pantheon's going to handle all that behind you. We'll automate that. We'll sync all of that up. And so we can just check this box and say, hey, I'm making this change. Now, I've only got one change here, which is why my deploy log is just one message of, hey, the same as the change I made. But I could have committed a lot of different changes and rolled those up into a feature release. So there could be a commit here for, I don't know, a new date time stamp, and then one for new calendar layout, and then another one for reoccurring events or something like that. And maybe the deploy log message is rolling out new events calendar, but it might be a series of commits to make that happen. So just something to be aware of. These don't have to be one-to-one, but for small changes, they tend to be. All right, so we're updating the call to action to red, and we're going to go ahead and deploy the code from development to test environment, and we're going to pull those files and database over. So we hit that. Again, this will show up in our workflow as this kicks off. We can see our other one, but it has not yet. Okay, there we go. So deploying code to test, and then cloning files from live and cloning the database from live. This will take just a couple moments. So while that's happening, I'll call out a couple other areas here to be aware of. We have over here kind of those automated backups that I talked about that they get scheduled and run in your workflow. If you want to clone down, so remember our final step was moving stuff down from production. You can go to the database and files and copy everything from live down to here. And so that's how, if you needed to move that stuff down when you were done, start a new feature, you can absolutely do that. But let's switch back over here to the deploy section here on the workflows. And we can see that's running right now. Give that just a moment. Anytime, any questions? All right, let me refresh. What page again? Okay, so we can see here that change to test has shown up. Let's refresh this test site. So again, it says test up here in the URL. So we refresh. Boom, red button here. So we made the change. It's now in our test environment. And this is where we could now send this off. We've copied everything from production. So at the moment, this is a clear clone of the production environment, with the only change being the code we changed. So a great testing environment. Hand this over to Q&A. Maybe it goes to design. We have them review. Something that would likely happen at this stage is if somebody reviewed this and said, hey, you just chose, you just wrote in red in your the background color. Like, we have a specific brand red, make it this hex value. And so, make sure it aligns. So that's where these kind of checks can be really important. But let's say, hey, we're fine with this red. That's what was intended all along. Well, then we're finally ready to do that final step, which is to move this into production. We don't need to worry about taking time to sync up the database and the assets because they're already live. They're canonical. All we need to do is to move that code over into production. And I'll leave this clear cache on here when we're done. And so we put it in and say, hey, here is the change that we're making. Let's go ahead and deploy this code over to production. So we kick off this kind of final workflow step. That still says it's running. Anyway, we're running this final step. And when this one's done, hopefully we'll be able to come back here, look at our production site, pantheondemo.com, and see that the button is red. So I'm going to go ahead and close test since we verified that it was working. Let this wrap up running here. Hopefully this is making sense, that it's intuitive, like, oh, hey, these are our useful steps. Now, these steps can be annoying at times, but they are very important. And the thing is, the time where they're most annoying is often when they're most important. It's when I needed to push out a change because something, was wrong on the main website, that I would be like, well, this change is so important and that it needs to go out that I'm going to skip test and push it straight to production, that I would then make a mistake and bring down production. And so in that moment, the idea of urgency made me want to skip a step so it would be quicker. But in reality, all I was doing was making even more risk. And so when I brought the site down, it was worse than just having the CSS messed up someplace. And so then all of that had to be fixed. And so that's why it's enforced at Pantheon. Like this workflow, your code's going to move from dev to test to production. And that's why we have that kind of structure in place, because we're opinionated. We feel this is the best way to develop websites. All right, let me refresh here and see if our change has made it. All right, it does look like it has. So I'm going to go ahead and refresh this demo site. Boom, our Pantheon demo site, the production site, now has a red button. And if you're doing a lot of these little changes, maybe it does feel like a bit of overhead. But if you're doing large feature requests, if you're regularly doing security updates, the peace of mind that this gives is huge. It is terrifying to roll out, if you've got an important site that you don't want to go down, to roll out a security update, especially on a Friday, knowing that something might mess up and your whole weekend is now shot as you try to figure it out. Instead, you can move it, and when you see that it works on test, you know it'll work on production and give you yourself that peace of mind. So that's kind of this workflow in practice. There is another piece here that can happen, which is that, hey, I'm working on that new feature, that new events calendar I was talking about is in work, and now all of a sudden a security update needs to come through. What do I do? So when we come back here to the kind of this workflow, we look at this dev site. If this has a bunch of calendar stuff on here, we were working on it and these updates came through and I need to deploy them. How does this work? Do I layer the update on top, but like my calendar code's only half done? That can't go to production. It'll break everything. So do I have to delete that work and then add it in later? Like, it could get difficult. And so if you're familiar with Git, you're like, well, Git solved this. There's like branches, you use those. And so what we've done is incorporating that into this idea of multi-devs. And so what this is you can spin up using the multi-dev feature. You can spin up new sandbox environments based on Git branches. And so if you create a multi-dev, it will create a branch for you. You can even look at your current branches and say, I want to create an environment based on this branch. And so very powerful tool for working together with people, or if you've got multiple streams of work happening with like security updates and new features. And so what happens now is that when you're working, you'll be working over here in this core update thread maybe. And then whenever it's ready, whenever your calendar feature is ready, you can then merge that into master to solve that problem. And so now all of a sudden you don't move your calendar in until it's ready to go. And so whenever a security update comes along, you can spin that up, run that all the way through the process, and then only bring in the larger features once they're fully formed and ready to make it into production. All right, so that brings us to the end of our getting started with Pantheon. Hopefully you know more about Pantheon than you did before. and maybe you're, hey, you could try out some new things. There are free sandboxes for anyone. So if you haven't yet, you can jump in there and sign up. Let me share that link that I promised out. And so this link will have all the all the information in it, hopefully, that you need. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So if you hit this link, you'll see first, thank you for going through the training. Second, we've got information about our other workshops. We're always looking for feedback. So if you're willing to, we'd love for you to fill out our feedback form and let us know how we're doing, maybe where we could improve, times that you would like more training to be available. But then the important things, resources from this workshop. So here is that article I talked about how Pantheon speeds up WordPress. So check that out, walks through the information that I shared and how we came to those conclusions to the speed increase. Here's that status page on what Pantheon can do. And those case studies I talked about, and then just some quick start guides that might be helpful for you. Also here we have links to our community. So if you want to know more, you can jump into our Slack or our forum, begin to talk to other people who use Pantheon, or myself and my coworkers, as we're also in those locations. We have office hours available as well, and our support team. By the way, I forgot to show this. If you're interested in support, it's really easy. Over here from the dashboard is the flag for support, and you can jump in here and chat immediately. You can go file a ticket, look in our documentation, so you can find support, hopefully wherever you need it, whenever you need it. All right. Well, thank you all for coming out. I'm not seeing any specific questions, so we'll go ahead and wrap things up here. But if you are interested, again, at the top of the hour, I'll be kicking off the workshop on launching a website. So if you're looking to roll out a website soon, it's a great way to better understand the things you should consider before you launch your website. All right. Thank you.